This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. Well, the day has finally come, the day we've all been anticipating. Tomorrow, Robert Mueller will sit for roughly 5 hours of questioning before a panel consisting of members of both the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. Now, Mr. Mueller has already indicated that the published Mueller report findings speak for themselves and there's no need for him to appear before Congress.
Now, I hope and expect this to be the only time that I will speak to you in this manner. I am making that decision myself. No one has told me whether I can or should testify or speak further about this matter. There has been discussion about an appearance before Congress. Any testimony from this office would not go beyond our report. It contains our findings and analysis and the reasons for the decisions we made. We chose those words carefully, and the work speaks for itself. And the report is my testimony. I would not provide information beyond that which is already public in any appearance before Congress.
As I have said many times before, it is not, nor has it ever been, up to Robert Mueller whether or not he testify before Congress, or whether their questioning would elicit information beyond the carefully chosen words contained in the Mueller report. And please note that Mueller isn't doing as so many other asswipes connected to this administration and Justice Department have done. He's showing up, not defying a subpoena. There are two substantial reasons why Mueller's testimony is necessary. First, there are several questions that remain after the release of the report, mainly due to spin from the Trump administration and continual muddying of the waters from Republicans. And second, there are millions of Americans, including members of Congress, who haven't read a single word of the Mueller report and instead relied upon Donald Trump and Fox News for that which they currently know about what is contained in it. This explains why so many people think Donald Trump was completely exonerated.
So after a long look, after a long investigation, after so many people have been so badly hurt, after not looking at the other side, where a lot of bad things happened, a lot of horrible things happened, a lot of very bad things happened for our country. It was just announced there was no collusion with Russia, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction, and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration. It's a shame that our country had to go through this. To be honest, it's a shame that your president has had to go through this before I even got elected. It began. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side. This was an illegal takedown that failed. And hopefully somebody's going to be looking at the other side. So it's complete exoneration, no collusion, no obstruction. Thank you very much.
Which is an odd thing to claim when you take into account that Donald Trump doesn't even think Mueller should be testifying tomorrow.
No, I'm not going to be watching, probably, maybe I'll see a little bit of it. I'm not going to be watching Mueller because you can't take all those bites out of the apple. We had no collusion, no obstruction. We had no nothing. We had a total no collusion finding.
If Donald Trump is so confident in his complete and total exoneration by the Mueller report, why is he worried about taking all those bites out of the apple? What a stable genius and wordsmith, right? Anyway, the reason he's worried and lying about not watching Mueller's testimony is because of answers to questions which we are certain to hear. First, Congress is going to get right down to business and ask why Donald Trump was not charged with obstruction of justice. Or more specifically, if Donald Trump were not the president of the United States, if he were just a regular American citizen like you or me, would the actions he took, which were outlined in Volume 2 of the Mueller report, have resulted in criminal charges of obstruction of justice? Because remember, the Mueller report cites the policy of the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, which states that a sitting president cannot be criminally charged. Now, that isn't law. Remember, that's just the OLC policy. And taking into account that Robert Mueller was a DOJ employee at the time and bound by its policies, it seems to follow that from the very beginning, it was never in consideration as to whether or not any of the potential evidence against Donald Trump would be compiled for use in a prosecutable criminal case. This question would open the door to Mueller's team's process and how he views what were clearly crimes. Next, they will be asking why Donald Trump was allowed to only answer questions in writing. Why was he not compelled to testify before the grand jury via subpoena? The American people need an answer to why Donald Trump was allowed to answer investigators' questions with some form of "I don't recall" almost 40 times.
I have no recollection of learning, nor do I recall learning. I have no independent recollection of what. I do not remember on what date. At this point in time, I do not remember whether. I have no independent recollection of any communication. I do not recall being aware during the campaign. I have no recollection of being told during the campaign. I have no recollection of being told during the campaign. I do not remember the date on which. I do not recall being provided any information. More than 2 years later, I have no recollection of any particular conversation. I do not recall being aware during the campaign. I do not recall having any discussion. I do not recall being told during the campaign. I have no recollection of any particular conversation in that regard. I have no recollection of being told that WikiLeaks. Likewise, I have no recollection of being told that Roger Stone. I do not recall being told during the campaign that Roger Stone. I have no recollection of the specifics of any conversation I had with Mr. Stone. November 8th, 2016. I do not recall discussing WikiLeaks. I do not recall having had any discussion during the campaign regarding a pardon. I do not recall being aware during the campaign of specific efforts by foreign individuals. I had few conversations with Mr. Cohen on the subject. As I recall, they were brief, and they were not memorable. And I do not recall any discussion of travel to Russia. I do not remember discussing it with anyone else. I do not recall being aware at the time. I vaguely remember press inquiries and media reporting. But I have no current recollection of any particular conversation. But I do not remember the specifics of what I knew at the time. I had no knowledge of Mr. Manafort offering briefings on the progress of my campaign to an individual named Oleg Deripaska. Nor do I remember being aware of Mr. Manafort. I do not remember Mr. Manafort communicating to me. I do not recall being told during the campaign of efforts by Russian officials. I have no recollection of the details of what, when, or from what source. I do not recall being involved in changing the language. I do not remember having been asked to attend.
By failing to subpoena him, Donald Trump was able to dodge any and all tough questions by not only hiding behind his lawyer's carefully worded prose, but also avoided what would have been devastatingly tough questions while face to face with seasoned investigators. This seems like a missed opportunity. This seems like a mistake. And what was behind it? And finally, be ready for the question to be asked whether or not, because of the OLC policy, Robert Mueller ultimately intended for the final report to serve as a referral to Congress related to impeachment proceedings. After all, the report itself states that they didn't explore a criminal charge because they didn't want to interfere with the potential congressional impeachment of Donald Trump. You can follow along as I read from page 213 of the Mueller report. Quote, "And apart from the OLC's constitutional view, we recognize that a federal criminal accusation against a sitting president would place burdens on the president's capacity to govern and potentially preempt constitutional processes for addressing presidential misconduct," unquote. And then check out the footnote on the very same page which cites the United States Constitution's impeachment clauses. Yeah. If they were to charge Donald Trump with a crime, it could, quote, potentially preempt constitutional processes for addressing presidential misconduct, unquote, aka impeachment. The question must be asked to find out whether Robert Mueller thought his job as special counsel was merely to gather evidence so Congress could do its job as outlined by the United States Constitution and impeach a criminally malign president.